You're listening to episode 84, Parents of Kids with Cancer. Hello, my friends. September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And over the past 4.5 years, I have had the opportunity and honor to interview many parents who are a part of a club that they didn't ask to be in. Like many of the other families who share their experiences, there's a common bond when you can look at another parent and say, yep, I've been through exactly what you're going through. And so I wanted to just go through some of the amazing stories that we've been able to share and give you some of the clips and the audio tips that we have gotten in this podcast from so many families. So I'll start off with Tara Garaghty. She is the founder of Making Cancer Fun, and I got to interview her almost 3 years ago now. And we chatted about how, you hear the word cancer and automatically, it's doom and gloom and it's having a hard time. And she tried really hard with her child to make cancer fun. Here's a little clip from her story. And also not focus on a lot of the details that people usually ask, like what stage is it and what are you going through? She chose very purposefully how she wanted to handle the situation. And so I want to give you some insight into what they did and how they handled it.
So her official diagnosis was she was a stage 4 high-risk neuroblastoma. And again, what's kind of interesting about that is I chose very purposefully not to share her stage with people. I told people she had neuroblastoma, but never that she was stage 4. And the reason I did that was for 2 reasons. One, when you hear stage 4, when somebody says I have stage 4 lung cancer or stage 4 anything, we tend to automatically put one of their feet in a grave, right? It's like, oh, well, you're done. And I didn't want to personally have to deal with the reactions of people. If they heard my daughter had a stage 4 diagnosis, I didn't want them to kind of write her off. And I also didn't want their maybe fear or their sadness or their grief over that to then transfer to her. Because a 3.5-year-old has zero idea what cancer is. It does not carry the same weight, the same fear. It means nothing to them the way it does to an adult. And so I think my mother and my sister were the only ones who knew her real diagnosis. Even the rest of my family, I didn't tell. And it wasn't until years later that she was done with treatment and had been transferred to a survivor's clinic and was a true survivor before I started telling people that she was a high-risk stage 4. I have the privilege, I will say, from before my daughter was diagnosed and before this happened, that I had spent 10 years working in personal development. That was kind of like my career, my field, and coaching people and working with women business owners and teaching, mindset and coping skills and things like that. And so I knew from my background that, what we focus on, what we allow our brain to focus on gets bigger, good or bad. That's how the brain works. It's kind of like when you get a new car and maybe you've never had a Jeep before, right? But now you're on the road and you're like, everybody has a Jeep. I had no idea everybody had Jeeps. Because once the brain has a thought, it starts to look for more of that. And so I knew that. And I was like, all I can see is all these horrible things that are happening. I'm like, I have to shift my brain, because otherwise I'm just going to I will actually start to create more horrible things because my brain's looking for it. And so I remember one night I sat down and I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to force my brain to focus on things that I can be grateful for. And the first night I listed, I think, 18 things. And the first one was just my mom. I was grateful that my mom was there and that she was willing to sleep in a hospital room with us overnight. The second thing was my cousin. My cousin happened to be an oncology nurse and worked in the hospital next door. So I was grateful that my cousin could be there and kind of talk to them. And so I just started listing everything I was grateful for. And then the second night, I listed 19 things I could be grateful for. And I just, every night, she'd lay in the hospital bed and I was there on my laptop and I would just list every possible little thing I could think of to be grateful for.
Next, I want to bring you back to Rosaria's story. And she is the mom of Brady, and she talks about what it was like when she had to handle the reality of a diagnosis like this, like cancer. And she is the host of the Living with Anxiety podcast, so go check her out as well.
Your parental rights have been essentially stripped from you, and no longer are you the one that can protect your child. Instead, chemicals and radiation become your child's protector. And that has to be one of the most difficult things to accept.
The next family I want to remind you about and reintroduce you to is Gillian's story and her daughter who had infant leukemia. And in our conversation, we talked a lot about the journey of having a baby with leukemia and the after effects that continue throughout her life and what that's like to be a parent who is dealing with it on a daily basis.
You know, this little girl has had chemo, which can cause learning disabilities. She's had a brain bleed. She has cerebral palsy. So with all of that, we were told that she basically has some processing issues. And she also has what they're referring to as a blind spot, but not necessarily with her vision. It's like a blind spot in the upper left. When her eyes look up and left, she can't process what she's seeing when she looks there. She can tell you what she's seeing, but she can't process any information, really, if that makes any sense. So if there were a stop sign to her upper left side, she would tell you it's a stop sign, but her brain might not tell her to stop.
One of the parts that Gillian talks about is the relationship she was able to form with another parent. And it wasn't a parent going through the exact same situation. Actually, her daughter had passed away. But it was this unspoken, easy friendship that got her through the ups and the downs. And it just was such a beautiful part of their story and this wonderful human that she got to know.
We were both having a really hard time. I ended up actually going to get some help this summer. I ended up going into they have like a psychiatric unit within our hospital. And I did stay there for 9 days. And Lauren helped to get me in there, of all things. She's grieving her daughter and she helped to take care of me. And we were just trying to think of ways to help other families. And I learned some great skills when I was in the hospital, and Lauren was going through a lot of the same issues, but obviously times a million. And so the two of us just had this ongoing Facebook message, and we would just text each other or Facebook message just the most random things that we could think of to make each other laugh. And 2:30 in the morning, can I call you? And sometimes it was just ridiculous threads of neither of us making sense, but just laughing. And that was the thing. It's hard to know what to do with a friend. You know, it's hard to make jokes when it's such a serious situation. But at the end of the day, that is what our friendship basically, we've always done that with each other. Our girls were in the ICU at the same time. We've really related and been able to survive with humor.
As a child life specialist who has worked with hundreds of children and families over the past decade, I know that no two children are the same. That means I need access to tools that can easily adapt to whatever situation I'm in. SmileMakers has thousands of unique items that help me navigate every scenario. Whether I'm looking for stickers and prizes for goodie bags for my patients or even my own kids, or I'm in child life specialist mode, working clinically to help a child cope with a medical procedure. I'm happy to support SmileMakers because they are a company who prioritizes the mental and emotional well-being of children by offering smiles on every page. Head to smilemakers.com when you're looking for a tool, toy, or prize to help a child smile. Use code ONCALL20 for 20% off your order of smile-making stickers, toys, patient supplies, and more. Scott Kramer is the father of Maddie Kramer, and she had a brain tumor, and Scott documented their journey through a journaling experience while he was in the hospital. And he has turned it into a book called Maddie's Miracles and the Miracles That Follow, and started an organization called Dancing While Cancering. He has so much wealth of love and kindness and information for parents. And so I have to share with you a little bit of our conversation. Do you mind sharing with us, if you can remember, what words did you use for Maddie? I mean, she's a 2.5-year-old and she's, more mature, but she's still a 2.5-year-old. How did you explain to her what was happening? What words did you use?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we took a little bit of advice, and we just also did a little bit of our own searching as to what resonates with Maddie. And the key from child life at the end of the day was to break it down, was that however it came out of our mouth, to explain it in a way that she could understand. And for us, we really did that, but then ultimately ran with it in a way to also try to make it positive. So initially, it was to try to help her understand the experience, to link the pain that she had had to now this world where post-surgery, she's diagnosed with what would ultimately be a rare form of cancer called ATRT that would put her on a 52-week chemotherapy protocol. So we had to explain not just this surgery and a world where she exits no longer in preschool, but with this neck brace, literally going to be spending weeks, if not months, in a hospital setting. And so we explained to her that she had a little ball in her neck called a tumor. And Maddie, remember, your neck was hurting. It's because you had this ball, this tumor in your neck, but your super doctors took it out. And that's why your neck feels better. Now we're going to have to take a special medicine called chemo to make sure that the tumor does not come back. And we just slowly would introduce that mantra at every instance that we could have. If she asked about her neck, we'd reiterate and say, Maddie, remember, your super doctors took it out. And when we were at the hospital for a chemo stay, we would remind her that as she's saying, I want to go home, we would just interject that we'll take the special medicine so that, and I very purposefully, you hear a little music in our voice because we had a little shimmy to go with it so that the tumor will not come back. And slowly but surely, it probably wasn't more than 2 weeks that you saw this 2.5-year-old with her life flipped upside down, playing with her little Peppa characters and saying, oh, Peppa, it's okay. You just had a tumor, but your super doctors took it out. And so she put it all together.
Wow.
And that framework of break it down and add a little fun, it permeated every step of our journey, whether it was the medicine that she took. We never called it medicine after that. When she was on her 10 to 15 out of hospital, bottles of stuff, it was vitamins, and it was Super A, which was, acyclovir, I think it was called, as these names come back to me. Super A was going to make her stronger and she would make a muscle. And that's, if she had to get an MRI, she was going to take a picture, and just trying to break it down in terms that she could understand. And the result was her moving through what would otherwise been very life altering and traumatic and soul crushing. She continued to grow, both emotionally, physically. Her home became the hospital. She became flexible for that just to be another play space in her life. And that, if there is a singular blessing in our journey, it's that despite going through hell, we didn't feel it because of her, because she was able to, we, with the help and guidance of Child Life, were able to create this safe bubble around her while still telling her the truth. And it was a beautiful thing to watch. And at the same time, with gratefully the bliss of hope, because Maddie's disease was not terminal. So this path forward, this new reality, and watching this little kid go from not knowing if she would survive to literally turning this hospital into her little playroom. It was a soul-filling, hope-filled time in life, because all we knew is that there was a treatment protocol. And so we lived in that presence of keeping her happy and keeping her loved and keeping her secure. And that was our medicine. That was our hope.
And the last family I want to reintroduce you to is Elizabeth's story. Elizabeth Billups eventually wrote a book for her daughter called The Puddle Jumper's Guide to Kicking Cancer. And one of my favorite parts of this conversation that we had was just how she looked at each of her children and chose to see the gifts that they were offering and bringing. And oftentimes when you have a child who has cancer, it's really easy to focus in on that child, but she so cautiously and specifically looked at her kids. And that's something that I've taken away and tried to look at within my own family. So I also love that she keeps it so real and talked about the way that she coped with all of the feelings that she had. Here's her take on how she handled all of the emotions.
I remember talking to a friend of mine who had just helped her daughter recover from a spinal cord injury. So obviously an extremely arduous, really awful experience. But luckily I was given this gift of having this conversation with this mom about a month in maybe. And we just had a long talk, 2 hours or something. And she told me that her secret to one of the things that she did is she found a room. It was like a linen closet or something. Or sometimes she'd go to her car and she would just scream and cry in her car or in this linen closet, which is just kind of funny in a weird way. So I used that. So that's my tip for anyone, because just to pass on her tip is that I would kind of give into the feelings so that I could get them out, I guess.
So along the way, we've been able to share a lot of family stories about dealing with cancer, and you can go find all of these and more at childlifepodcast.com, as well as a lot of resources that you can print and share for kids, for caregivers, all within pediatric cancer. So thank you so much for being here, and I will see you again next week.